So, hello everyone. Welcome to the BEwell Hub Experience. I'm Gary Judge. I'm going to be your host today, your co-host, because we have also Ken Caputo, who's going to be our co-host in this exciting hour together. You'll find the guest speaker's contact details in the chat if you want to contact him directly after the event. And so this is today's talk is entitled Ancient Principles of Tai Chi for the Modern Workplace. Okay, so it's ancient principles of Tai Chi for the modern workplace. We have Ken Caputo, a seasoned Tai Chi and mindfulness expert. So, Ken, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe just talk a little bit about the topic before we go into depth?
Sure. Yeah. So this is my first business was taking over a martial arts school back in the early 1990s. So and I've been teaching professionally for over 3 decades. I've done a lot of stuff since then. And part of that, a lot of people think of martial arts, like fighting and self-defense, and there's that part of it, but there's also a big component about balance and in your life, in the way that you're integrating mind, body, spirit, that kind of thing. Tai Chi is sort of a sub branch of martial arts that really distills out a lot of the health and wellness specific aspects from the training so that you can focus on that part more without risk of injuring yourself or worrying about people punching at you. Not everybody enjoys that, especially adults. So it brings a lot of that elements to it. And what I found over the years is I got more and more involved entrepreneurially in running businesses, hiring employees, that kind of thing. The elements of Tai Chi that allow you to find balance in your work and your life, as opposed to trying to achieve work-life balance, were incredibly powerful and very translatable. And what they found is a lot of these principles are very old, but they're now being backed and confirmed by modern neuroscience. So the more we learn about how the brain works and how our own neurochemistry works, the more it's confirming that these things that have been around for centuries, millennia really, are very effective and helpful. So that's kind of the background, and it's just, so I've had my teacher who passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, had worked with me privately. He was a Taoist master. He was a martial arts master, a Qigong master, which is a type of breath work, and had shared that knowledge with me for decades. And he had translated into both corporate settings and working with professional athletes, especially tennis and golf players. So I have a very deep wisdom tradition to draw from. It's not me. It's been passed down through me, and now I'm just sharing it as best I can with people like all of you.
Yeah. I don't really know much about the practice of Tai Chi. What I do know is I see some groups of people, sometimes in gardens and in parks, doing the Tai Chi movement, very slow, deliberate. What can you talk us through that? What are they doing? What is the purpose of that?
Yes, so there's actually a couple of different components. So usually when you see the physical movements, that's usually what's called Tai Chi Chuan, which Chuan is just kind of a term for boxing. So it's a series of choreographed movements that you're taught in a sequence that allow you to kind of connect physically to the breath and your awareness, the world around you. And it's really good for flexibility, strengthening, and balance, all that kind of stuff. So, and there are like a ton of different styles usually that came from different families. So what was taught to me is an offshoot of Chen Men Ching. His Yang style Tai Chi form was what it's called. But you can find, if you look it up on Google Tai Chi, you'll see Chen and Wu and Sun, and really all they are just variations on central themes, which is how can I move my body slowly, deliberately, and mindfully in a way that cultivates health and well-being over time? And it's incredibly popular, especially in countries like China. So that's where you see people would go to the park and, hundreds of them would all be doing these movements together. And it's very powerful when you do that. There's this kind of resonance that's created where you're feeling everyone moving and you just feel very connected to the other human beings as you all kind of agree to align yourself in this practice at the same time. So just that in and of itself is very meditative and calming.
So, I mean, looking at bringing that into the workplace, Ken, how can that be brought into the workplace? I mean, is there a specific moment that needs to be created where the team or your staff can actually come together to do that? Or is it something just mentally? Is it, so how does that, how can we bring that flow, that peace, and that being deliberate into the workplace?
It's actually super easy, and honestly, the practice of it is just to connect you into a way that you already are. It's just to remind you of your natural state of openness and relaxation and calm. So a lot of times what happens is the more you practice it, the more you just sort of move through the world in a more comfortable and balanced way. But there's some physical things that you can do, and I can actually show you one right now while you're sitting in a chair. And a lot of times this is really, really helpful, especially if you're sedentary for a long time. And all you need to do is sit so that your back is not supported by the back of the chair. It actually helps a little bit to shift your weight forward. So almost like you're getting your hips towards the front of the chair, right? And then you get your ankles so that they're aligned directly below your knees. So you just kind of make a 90-degree angle as best you can with your legs. And then all you're going to do is you're going to push gently with your heels and you'll feel your thighs kind of become a little bit active. And then you just reach up with the crown of your head and then just rest your hands on your thighs and you'll feel your back kind of open and decompress a little bit, right? And you don't want to like strain in it. It's just one of the principles of Tai Chi is head suspended from above. So, and the idea is like someone had a string on the top of your head and they were drawing you up like a marionette, right? So you just kind of let from the back of your head, just kind of reach up. So we don't tilt our head, we just extend and you just feel this kind of openness. And then you just do a couple of breaths and you just breathe in through your nose, just relax. There's no real rhythm to it. Out through your mouth. And when you inhale, you try to expand your belly. It's a diaphragmatic breath. And when you exhale, you just squeeze your belly in. So, and as you do this, you just kind of inhale, and it's in through the nose, you feel your belly expand, and just imagine your whole body kind of opening and rising a little bit. And then when you exhale, let your weight sink into the chair and the bottom of your feet. So it's almost like a wave, this sense of opening where the body rises a little bit, and then you just breathe out and you relax. And one more thing, if you can, just as you breathe in, feel the air being a little bit cool and dry in through your nose. And then when you breathe out through your mouth and feel how that air is a little bit warm and moist. And the idea is to just breathe in more of what you want. So if you want to be relaxed right now, you just imagine inhaling that relaxation. And then whatever tension that's displaces, just let it go as you breathe out. So this could be if you're feeling a little, unfocused and you need a little bit of energy or confidence, you breathe that in. And then you let go of the fatigue or whatever it is. And this is it. You're doing Tai Chi right now. So, so when you're at work, if you were to do this, say 3 to 5 breaths every hour, maybe set a little timer on your watch or something like that, you'll find that at the end of the day, you have more energy. And part of that reason is when we do this, the diaphragmatic breath, especially, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And that causes us to kind of release stress hormones from the body that are unnecessary. So you're kind of, you think of like the stress of our workday is like a bucket that's slowly filling. So every time you do this, you're emptying some of the whatever's in that bucket. So there's more room. So at the end of the day, you're not overflowing and overloading with the stresses that were created, right? A lot of times we would use this to start a meeting. So we would just take a minute, and before we just dive right in, transitions are very challenging when we're going from our minds in one place and then we switch to a new client or a new environment and we haven't hit like a little reset button. So 3 breaths like this is like a reset button. So now everybody's kind of let go of wherever they came from and they're able to be a little bit more present. And over time, you just do this naturally more and more. You don't even have to remind yourself anymore. It's just kind of a state that you return to whenever you feel the stressors starting to kind of get a little, the bucket's getting too filled. You'll notice it and you'll just think, oh, I should probably empty that, make a little bit more room.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm just, as I was listening to you, Ken, I was just trying to understand how I could integrate this practice, uh, mindfulness or breathing techniques into my team, because I have 5 people working here daily on a daily basis, plus other people that come and go, teachers in the school. And so it's not something that in the last 25 years of running my school that I've implemented. So it's just trying to think of how is this new trend. Everyone's talking about meditation, everyone's talking about mindfulness, everyone's talking about, like, being present and breathing, but actually bringing it in, but making it like, how can you say, it's not like a woo-woo thing, it's
Yep.
a trendy stuff. Bring it in now, because they're all young people. The youngest person I've got in the team at the moment is 19, and so the oldest is 34. So, and there's Gary coming in with his new ways of approaching the daily activities and tasks. So how would you, Steve? I know you got your hand up. Can I just finish? So how would you suggest a leader, in my case, that's what I am, implementing or bringing these new ways of being into the workplace?
So I work with a lot of organizations like that, and that's a really great question that comes up a lot. And one of the interesting things is if you reflect back on what you just did, you probably notice, if you think about it, it was hard to think about anything else. You're layering sensory input. So by focusing on that, just feeling, I had you feel the ground, feel your body, feel the breath, and just kind of open your awareness a little bit. So a lot of times what I tell to leadership is share something that's helping you. So you're just saying, I learned this and it's helping me relax. It's helping me feel a little bit less stressed. And it was really easy. So here's what I learned. I learned to sit like this. I learned to do the breath, and I learned to just kind of breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. Why don't you guys try it and let me know how it goes for you? Let me know if that's helpful. So, and a lot of times, so most of my businesses have been involved with teachers, teachers that are teaching at some level. And we refer to them as awakened guides because a teacher sometimes can create a power dynamic where they have knowledge and their job is to inject that knowledge into the student. And you can see this with leadership. I have vision, direction, and goals, and my role is to inject that into the people that I'm leading. So when you think like a guide, what you're doing is you're coming from a place of having knowledge that you're using to help other people safely get to the destination, right? So you're on the journey with them. So a lot of times what I would suggest is instead of telling, just share, and more importantly, model it. So if you're going through your day and you're a little bit more relaxed and you're smiling and they come to you with stressors and you're like, oh, let me take a breath before I answer that. Now you're not telling them what to do. You're demonstrating something that has value. And now they're going to ask the question, what are you doing? Now it's my mentor would always say, if you say it, they doubt it. If they say it, it's true. And a lot of times, really, that's the best way that we learn is when we've opened ourselves up and we're asking questions instead of someone trying to drive answers into our head.
Great. That was a great point there. Thank you, Ken. Steve, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I did raise it. In the thought that came to mind, it's this idea that everything that Ken had just shared, it's this idea that people won't recognize it until they experience it. And so if they can experience it, once, right? If they come in and they're a stress state, and then all of a sudden a few breaths allow them to shift that focus and that, you know, that attention, and now they're more aware and more present. Because if you're in that stress moment, you're thinking about everything else that's stressing you out, right? And so what, you know, one idea would be to just play this recording that Ken had just shared. You know, it's like, hey, you know, I'm feeling a little bit stressed, and we did this on the BEwell series, and I'd just like to share it with y'all. It'll help me, and it'll be before we do the meeting. And what it does is it kind of removes you from this, and then also as you practice it, you'll get better at it, right? And so the more that you practice it, you know, eventually you won't need the guidance, but it's just a kind of a very simple way to take 5 minutes and reset. And what I found is when someone experiences that, that's the goal, because it's not so much what telling them something, but when they can realize that they can do a emotional regulation, or you know, a reset on how they feel, and then that will come into play some other time. Like they'll be, I've done it at home myself. I'll get upset and I'll tell myself, okay, Steve, breathe, right? And it'll reset that emotion. So it's a wonderful way to do it. And I think it also normalizes just the humanity of life. You know, we don't, it's modeling that we're all human.
Yeah, yeah, great, Steve. I think, yeah, just listening to you there is also the point is it also gives you the space rather than reacting, responding. If you're able to take that few seconds to say, give me 1 second, just give me 1 second. Okay, I've got it. I'm going to just take a couple of breaths and then I'm going to answer that. That gives you that space as well to answer with some insight or some lucidity. Like, so you're not just reacting to the situation.
And just one small thing to add, with a lot of the clients I work with, I always tell them, don't make a decision from a place of fear or a place of deep emotion that you don't like. If you can make a decision and make it from a place of calm or a place of intention, that decision is going to be much more valid than a decision made in the heat of a moment. And so I say, if you're not feeling secure, if you're not feeling, you know, strong in who you are, find out what will help you, because the decision that you make in that moment will probably be wrong. So that's all I wanted to throw in there.
Malcolm's got his hand up. Malcolm?
Yeah, I go out and walk most mornings, and there's a couple of Asian ladies, old ladies. I said they must be, you know, early 80s or whatever. I know like 4 words in Mandarin, so I can't really communicate with them. But they're doing Tai Chi. My wife has always expressed an interest in it, and it always strikes me as a kind of a vertical yoga.
Yes.
But it's very much in control. Like you said, you know, going through the, you know, what could be aggressive motions or defensive motions, but in a very controlled sort of do no harm or not be harmed way. So it's fascinating. And as I've traveled in different countries, I go out and run in the mornings, and I used to, and I'd often find, you know, groups of people, especially Singapore, places like that. You know, it's, you know, even before they go to work, they get their minds right. So yeah, thanks. That was a good perspective from a practitioner.
Thanks, Malcolm. Ken, let me give you let me give you a situation. Perhaps you can actually run this through with using Tai Chi in the modern workplace. Okay. The situation was this morning. I had to go to the bank. I had to speak to the bank director to ask for an increase of an overdraft. So my business has an overdraft to, you know, for the payments that don't come in on a monthly basis. We have an overdraft, and I wanted to increase that overdraft by another 100%, like 100%. So it was, and the business hasn't been going that well lately with COVID and so on. So the person in the office said, "Good luck, Gary, because, you know, it's going to be a tough conversation." How could I have prepared for that conversation? It's done now. This is already done, but I mean, I'm looking back now. How could I prepare for that conversation using Tai Chi?
So it would just be the way you choose to intentionally arrive to the situation. So like for example, my trained response through practicing all of these years is what we call smiling eyes. It's just whenever I meet someone, I put about 10% more energy into smiling, not even with my face, but with my eyes, proportionate to what they're giving me. So not so much that you're annoying, you don't want to be that cheerful person when someone's having a bad day, but you just give them a little bit more. So in advance, if I'm, especially for difficult situations, but really just any situation, you walk up and you're just feeling in yourself, good morning. I'm seeing you, and this connection is the first thing that needs to occur before we exchange information. And there's an expression my mentor used a lot that I always loved. He said, you're in a good space when your head and your heart are singing the same song. And often when we've got difficulties, what ends up happening is so you're in a place of emotional distress. You're nervous, right? And then you have a bunch of thoughts, right, about what you need to do and what you need to convince this person of. So if you go in that way, then you're starting from a place of unbalance. So now whatever happens is just going to be adding energy to a system that wasn't imbalanced to begin with. So but like a lot of times you go to the bank, you're sitting in the car, you do 3 breaths, you think, I am going to be a kind, gentle person in this, but I'm also going to hold my boundaries, and I'm going to be assertive in expressing my needs. But I'm going to do it from a place of smiling, and I'm going to do it from a place of calm, or understanding whatever it is. So you find what is balanced to you before you step into the situation. And that's really how you use it. So you're going into a stressful meeting with your team, and you just choose who you're going to be, and you practice it in advance of that meeting beginning. And the fascinating thing about it is this is like martial arts in general, even from a self-defense perspective. You're in a training facility and you're practicing difficult situations, and you're learning to be more and more skillful and appropriate. So then when unexpected things come up, you've created habits that are probably going to be more effective than if you hadn't practiced. So it doesn't mean it's always going to work. It's not the movies. You might go into the bank teller and it doesn't work, but you've practiced. So now the odds are more in your favor that the way the conversation is going to go is going to be more positive and productive, not just for you, but for them. I've had a lot of times I've had situations like that where someone has said to me, I've been having a difficult day and this was the nicest exchange I've had. So because they have their own stuff that they're bringing to the environment. Your team always does. You don't know what's going on in their lives. Sometimes they don't. So it's not just about you or them. It's the dynamic interaction between that matters.
Thanks, Ken. Debbie's got a hand raised. Debbie?
Yeah, actually you answered the question already, Ken, but I'll post it anyway. I'm a coach, as many of the folks here in this group are as well. And in principle, we know this stuff. I mean, I know, in principle, I know the stop, right? Stop, think, observe, proceed, That's the stop sign thing, right? And we know mindfulness, and we know in quotes, what we should be doing. And still we screw it up. I mean, I screwed it up this week. Okay. I did this. I screwed it up this week. And I was thinking, how could that happen to me? How could I have gone and said something that I actually would like to not have said? I was not as bad as I would have been before I learned all of my coaching. but I wasn't as good as I would have liked to have been. But you also just answered the question that you said, practicing, I mean, it's like some people are blessed and they can do it faster. And you have the really stubborn ones that stick to their, they just can't get out of their skin somehow, and they make that mistake again. Okay, but yeah, that's what, if there's a shortcut, I'd appreciate to find out what it is.
It's funny, there's not really shortcuts, but so when I'm coaching people, a lot of times we shift to language early on, and I'll tell them replace good and bad with skillful and less skillful. So it's like, I'm a bad communicator. No, you're just not as skillful at the act of communicating. How do we become skillful at something? We need a framework that allows us to practice effectively. We need tools, right? So I'll give you a really simple example we've used for years with kids. We have parents, their kids get emotional and they don't know what to do. And they tell their kids to calm down, or they put them in timeout, or whatever it may be. The child is unskillful at emotional regulation, right? And so what we do is we teach them a skill called counting out. And we do it when it's fun for the kids. So we teach the kids to make a fist and pretend that they're in an emotional state and they need a pattern interrupt. So, and then they just simply count to 5 and they flick out a finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They shake their hand, the forearm relaxes, they put it on their belly, and they do that belly breath we learned early, 2 to 3 times. So now a parent is saying to their child nothing other than, hey, you have a tool you've learned. Let's implement the tool and see what happens on the other side. Now, the interesting thing is, if the kids only ever try to use the tool when they're in an agitated state, it doesn't help. They have to practice it when, we'll tell them, when your kid's watching a show and laughing, tell them to count out really quick. Like, link it to, associate it to positive states. And then you'll have a resource, you have something you can access. So a lot of times with our teams, and even with the coaches, I work with a lot of coaches and a lot of teachers, they have a lot of skill sets, but they're not framing them as something that they can work, like what we would call a kata. That's what Tai Chi is. It's a prescribed series of movements that you do over and over again. That's how you get good at it. So like we teach a communication skill called the communication triangle. And it's just send out your message as best you can. That's step 1. Step 2 is recognize if that message has been received. So watch for the signals. And a lot of people forget that. So what they do is they say what they want to say, but then they don't shift their attention to what did they hear. And then the third step is confirm that you both understood the same thing. So, so when I'm working with people, all of a sudden now it's like, I have 3 things. I'm going to speak as well as I can. I'm going to see if they understood it, and then I'm going to confirm it before we move on. And that's easier for them to remember than just be a better communicator, be a better listener. That's not super actionable. And as coaches, I know early on, I started doing all this because that's what would happen. Sometimes I'd be more successful helping people than others, but I wasn't developing a framework, number 1, that would work for me consistently, and number 2, that I could start teaching to other people, because I didn't want to be a solopreneur. I wanted to hire people to be awesome at doing the things that they wanted to do with me, So is that helpful?
Actually, yes. And you called me out because my profession is actually communications. And I have taught people communication. I know the 4 sides of a message. I know the 3 that you were mentioning. That's what I'm saying is what I want to say, and what you hear is something different, and what I intended to say is something different, and what you understood is something totally different, right? So there's those 4 sides of a message. But darn it, humanity, gets back in. And
It's so true.
yeah, well, let me just tell you, okay, the situation was this. I didn't want to do this, but I didn't want to do something. And I've been resisting it for about a year. And it's a nice thing, right? But I have friends who are pushing me, they're really actually kind of bullying me to do it, to go along with them and do that. And so I went and I decided, okay, I'll try and see what I have to do to be able to join them on this trip. And it would have cost me 60% more than what it would have cost me for something I didn't want to do, and it would have cost me 60% extra. And so I wrote him and I said, I'm not going to do it because it costs 60% extra. So this is end of story. Stop bullying me, right? They've been bullying me for about 4 or 5 months now. And one of the friends writes, how could you dare make plans that would cost me 60% more without asking me in advance? And I just kind of exploded. For my better way of putting it, right? Because it used to be if I would have exploded, it would have been different, but now I didn't explode in that sense. But I responded with, what a stupid assumption. You wouldn't have had to pay anything. That is a really stupid assumption. And so that's what it is. I was angry. I was the one who would have had to pay more. I was the one who was getting the 60% extra. I didn't want to do this to begin with. And because they've been bullying me to do this. And it was like, here I am. I went out on a limb to do this. All of this stuff. So the story doesn't really matter. But the thing is that I wasn't able to catch myself because I was probably emotional. And I guess the question is, how do we get the emotions out of this? How can we, and that was what it is. And I like the fist, because sometimes apparently, even as grown-ups, we are kids inside. We get emotional with something. And I like that idea before I go out on a limb with something that I want to say because I'm bothered by it, I could do that. So thank you for that. Very good.
Dan Pink wrote this book, Drive. And one of the things I always liked in it was he talked about the elephant and the rider, and the fact that our emotions are like the elephant and our intellect is the rider. You don't tell the elephant what to do. You guide it as best you can and hope that it goes along.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's interesting, like as an athlete, I've been an athlete my whole life, you have to learn to be skillful in an emotional state. So it's like you don't get to find the quiet in the storm. You have to develop the skill set of serenity in the storm.
Right.
And and actually when I do, like, organizations want me to come in and do stress management, which I change that metaphor, because you don't manage stress. Stress is stress. And it's not even a bad thing. It's just, again, how skillful you are at it. So I'll have them visualize just being on the beach and imagining a giant 20-foot wave coming slamming down, crashing over you, and what that would feel like, right? But then imagine that you're an expert surfer and you're out on the water. That same wave, you have a very different relationship with it now, because you can navigate it. You can actually do tricks. You look forward to the bigger waves because they create opportunities for you to become more skillful. And every surfer crashes. They're not successful, but you make as many mistakes as you can, as fast you can, and that's how you reach your inner genius. So we have to have a little bit of compassion when we screw it up, because we're going to. That's human, But then it's really just feedback, and now you can think, all right, let me replay that. How could I use that to be more skillful in how I handle a situation like that, the next time? And really, that's all we're all doing that all the time. I think that it's just, for most of us, it's not a conscious, it's happening unconsciously. So we're practicing, just kind of haphazardly. So then our result is haphazard. I remember someone saying to me, every system is designed to perfectly deliver the results it's currently delivering. So if you want different results, you have to change the system. You got to change the design.
Okay, Steve's got his hand up. Stephen?
I'd love the whole conversation, and we started off with a conversation around balance, and that was something that I wanted to carve for my daughter. So I carved this kanji, and this is the term for balance. But what is amazing about this is everything that you've been speaking about. The one symbol is for harmony, and the other one is in chaos. So it's having harmony within chaos is considered balance within kanji. And what a beautiful, expression of everything that we're talking about. It's having, even though there's chaos around us, it's having that balance internally, or having that harmony internally, and that creates balance. So I just wanted to share that. I thought it was interesting.
That's actually cool. From a martial arts perspective, I was taught balance is an illusion. It is a series of micro corrections. It's a constant state it's an active state that, so when you stand on one leg, you're not balanced. Your muscles are working really, really hard, And just the better you get at it, the more refined and efficient those motions become. So there's less energy exertion, but there's always work. It's not, there is no balance. There's just a, dynamically opposing forces working together to achieve what looks like balance. That was the way that, I was trained in it, which was interesting.
Well, I love that, because if the one term is chaos, then to have harmony, it is constant correction, right? So exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
Malcolm's got his hand up, Stephen. Malcolm?
Yeah, it was just a thing that you'd said earlier, Gary, and what Stephen triggered it. I think we get a lot of balance, we get a lot of just peace and quiet in our lives, understanding the difference, I believe, between reacting and responding. And I've always believed that the word respond came from the French penser. You think about something, you rethink about how you're going to work. I've never found any validation to that, but there should be. Okay, I feel a bit like Costanza. I'm just making a word up here. But it's a choice then how we think about adapting to a situation or reacting to it. And to Debbie's point, sometimes we, that hot button is pressed, we react and we go on to that mirror neuron that the other person is busy with, and if they are angry, we get sucked into that, and it's how we choose to respond. And it takes practice, and it's the cost to ourselves. And this is, I'm sitting here scratching notes on wherever. What we're going to talk about next week, Gary, is in a similar vein, but it's an intertwined story. And I always believe that we can hear the same message from 4 or 5 sources. It's when the right messenger comes along. And I think they say when the student is ready, the master appears, or wherever it is in there. So, but these are skills we can learn, and it's ultimately a choice. And I've got some clients that choose to live in chaos, and they love to tell people about it. But then it is. It's that grace. And I think it comes. Look, I'm probably one of the most lazy people I know. I'll find the quickest way between 2 points, and I'll tell you about it. But to your point of expending energy and creating stress and all of that stuff, I'm not sure which kind of athlete you were, but you look a bit like a runner.
I think Ken's martial arts practitioner.
Yeah.
I was I've competed in martial arts for a couple decades. I was a cross-country mountain biker for a lot of years. And now I am, sort of a runner. I do obstacle course racing. So it's a combination of trail running and things like carrying buckets and Atlas stones and crawling through mud and, going up multi-rigs. And yeah, so I've done a lot of different, I was a springboard diver in college. Just my whole life, I've done various things. Yeah.
Well, when I stopped playing rugby, I went into something less strenuous, and I got suckered into running marathons and then ultra marathons.
Oh, yeah.
And any endurance athlete understands composure, because you are using energy in the most efficient way. So from what you're saying there, now I'm starting to get a little bit more of an understanding of what I'm seeing with some of these old ladies and other people with Tai Chi. It's conservation of energy.
Yep.
Yeah. And
It's
anyway,
it's also it's connection. So like if right now you just all reach out in front of you with your hand, like you're grabbing something, right? Just reach out and just feel what that's like, right? So you're using a limb. So now push your feet, your feet into the ground, your hips into the chair, and then kind of open your chest, and then lift your shoulder, lift your elbow, let your wrist come up and your fingers come up last. You're reaching, but you just connected through your spine and through the earth. That's Tai Chi. So we don't move our arm, we turn our spine, and our hand moves because of it. So I'm not waving my arm around, I'm using my body the way it was designed. So it's all integrated movement. So that's what you're seeing. And that's what makes it so graceful and pretty to watch, because what you're seeing is not someone who views themselves as a whole bunch of separate parts that they're trying to, organize through willpower. They're connecting to the way that they naturally want to move through the world, and then they're just getting skillful at applying it. So in the Tai Chi masters that I've seen, really, really advanced, they barely move. They don't need to move much. They get the benefit by doing less. I get most of the benefit from Tai Chi now by just reflecting on it. You don't need the physical movements as much anymore.
Gary is no doubt familiar with the game squash. Yeah, in schools in Britain, if you were fortunate enough, you play it. And if we ever played with somebody much older, I played squash with an army sergeant who was maybe 80 years of age, and he could beat the pants off me and anybody else around it without breaking a sweat. Could anticipate what was going to be happening. It's experience.
Yeah.
Move off the tee. It's like racquetball. It's just a bit more graceful.
Malcolm, Stanley, you got a question? 1 minute.
Yeah,
Stanley?
yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Stanley, go ahead.
Ken, I found this really interesting actually, because prior to listening to this, I thought Tai Chi was all about fighting. So I think it's refreshing to hear a very different side to it. My question is, I work in a very busy emergency department, and obviously, as you would imagine, there's a lot of emotions in that place. You've got people that are anxious, angry, upset. How do I apply principles like this in everyday work?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And a lot of times, so de-escalation skills is something we talk about a lot. And it's funny, like even in the fighting art. So I've been teaching and training for almost 35 years. And since I started training, I've never had to physically use it. So, but then I physically use it every day. I've fallen. I've been in, tense situations. So you learn to apply it, not through, like it's not force, it's modeling. So a lot of times in those types of situations, it's how you choose to be. So, I'm sure that you guys are trained when someone's really agitated, you stay calm, you keep a rhythmic tone of voice. You don't feed into the energy of their emotion. You model quiet competence, is what we would call it. So, and a lot of times, kind of like I was saying to Gary before, it can be very difficult because right now their problems are much greater than the perspective that they have, and which is going to keep them in a heightened emotional state. So it's really just if you can get them outside of themselves, so like a little bit of eye contact and say, hey, just eyes on me, look at me, breathe with me. We're going to get through this. You keep your cadence rhythmic, and you just model being that like buoy in the turbulent ocean, that if they just hold on to that, they're less likely to drown. And we've always found that we have to offer it more as an invitation, as opposed to do this and you'll be better, or hey, I need you to calm down. That kind of stuff doesn't work. It's just, let me share something. If you want to, I'm over here and I'm in this state of balance, even though you're not. So how about coming over and join me? Here's a simple way for you to come over here and feel different from the state you're in right now. So is
I think,
is
I
that
think
helpful?
I think it's creating that space, isn't it, Ken, Stanley?
It is.
It's creating that space where you're inviting people to come in there through the way you are, trying to be open and connect with them. And I'm bringing it back to the workplace, because that's what happens when we have some, heated discussions. In the past, I was not able to create that space, and so the discussions just went, who can shout the loudest, or who can actually bring in the power, who's and then the discussion stops there. But in this case, where Stanley is in his workplace as well, I think it's creating that space and letting them come into you a little bit, which is means you being also open and empathic, and of course a different skill.
And the interesting, that's like some of the most difficult situations. Like I've seen that, not like even with parents, and a lot of times, so the parents are in crisis, the child is in crisis. There's a difficult situation. I'm helping navigate it. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to figure out who's the one that's most likely to respond, that I can recruit into being a more balanced place. So I would imagine in an ER, if there's a family member there with them, maybe you can reach the family member, and then the family member is the one that reaches the person who's in crisis. But if the family member's in crisis and they're like feeding off of each other, so but it's very difficult. I don't think that there's going to be like a surefire way to find that balance and center. But your best shot is to first model it, practice it so that you model it all the time in a healthy way, and then just start looking at the environment and seeing, where are the opportunities for this to kind of spread like a virus, and sometimes it's more effective than others. But if they're really, if they're supercharged, there may not be much you can do other than hold your own state. When I was a teenager, I learned, I was a lifeguard. And one of the things we learned is if someone's going to take you under the water with them, you got to back up and let them drown. And then hopefully you can resuscitate them, but it's no good for anyone if you both go under. So, so sometimes it's even that, and that's like back to team organizations. Sometimes you have to fire someone. They're just, you can apply all these tools and it's not working. And the only option left is something in the environment has to be removed, in order for there to be positive change. It's not what we want, but that's the reality of the chaos that is humanity.
Amazing. It's really wise. Thank you. Thank you.
Very welcome, Stanley.
This year, 2023 has been quite a year where I've had to sort of rebuild my business. And so I had to lay some people off as well. And that was painful. And there were emotional conversations, because on one side, these people have been working with me for the last minimum 5 years or even longer. And on the other hand, I realized that the good for everyone was to actually reduce the staff and actually start with a new vision, a new outlook. So yeah, I mean, I always look at the workplace, because this is where I'm here every day. As Debbie said, there are a lot of good concepts, but it's actually putting those principles and concepts into practical issues. That's where the challenges lie.
Yeah, that's my work, creating frameworks, and we do lots of fun stuff. Like we use 5-animal kung fu. And as we all have different ways of solving problems. Some people are understanding oriented. They want to ask questions and gain perspective. Other people are action oriented. They want to lead from the front. They want to do something. So if those two people don't understand that about each other on your team, there's going to be disconnect. So, but as soon as you say, hey, they love to understand, but they can be paralyzed. So if you collaborate with them, you fuse your action, your tiger mind with their crane mind, and now you're going to have a more balanced pathway forwards. So, so we take people through their relationship with these different ways of solving problems, the different ways of communicating. and then they find where their strengths are and where their challenges are, and they learn to respect that in each other. So, and it just comes from giving them a model that they can use to kind of energize a conversation instead of just pointing out the problems, saying we need to communicate better, we need to be more productive, we need to make more money. None of that is actionable. You got to give them frameworks and, a shared language that we can all agree to, so that, I mean, one of the first things we learned was if there's tension, someone needs to stop and say, what is the result we're trying to produce right now? Let's stop talking about advocating for our position and remind ourselves of what we're moving towards. And that's a path to navigating towards agreement, but we had to train everyone to ask that question, So it's that kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right, Gary. I see a lot of chaos when people don't have those a shared language and models,
As the leader as well, or it's actually painting the big picture, because a lot of people, a lot of the employees, staff, they don't see the bigger picture. They see where they are, and they see what they want, what they need. They don't see the bigger picture, and it's up to the leader in their way to actually just say, this is what's, let's look at it this way, rather than just this small thing, not
Well, and often you got to pace lead. If they're in what we call nuts and bolts, they're caught up in the details. Work through the details with them so that they can resolve that. Then you can expand. So like we would see this with parents. Their kids are emotional and they try to reason with them. It's like, no, meet them where they are. They're in emotions. Or if it's a detached teenager who's just being all rational, don't try to spark emotion. Talk to the part of them that's awake. And what happens is then the other part it'll bleed over and you'll find the balance. So if someone's like in a vision place and you're trying to discuss details, they're not there. Their head's in a different space. So go hang out with them and then say, hey, why don't we come over here and talk about this now? It's the old Stephen Covey thing, seek first to understand, then be understood. It's really just that,
Yeah, Debbie's got a hand raised, and we're coming to the end. I've also put the link for the YouTube channel in the chat. So if you go to that, you can see the videos. The recording will be put on that in the next few days, and the past ones are already there. So Debbie,
I'll make it really short because I know we're closing. You actually answered some of my questions that I had, but the main one was, how do you teach this to leaders? Is there, I'm sure there's not a shortcut, but what is at the heart of it when you're teaching this to other leaders? Because you said you're a coach and you go out and you talk to them, and you and we know to model it if we are the leader, but how do you teach that leader to be a model? How do you reach that person? How do you get them to see the value? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. How do you teach them? I don't know. Does that make sense? I mean, you're modeling it for them, and they know, but it's only up here. It's not here yet. And how do you reach them when you're trying to teach the leader?
So this is something that's helpful whenever you're promoting your business or you're doing your work. Your clarity fuels their understanding. So I just focus on being as clear as possible on the system, the model, or the language, depending on what they ask. So I'll just ask like 5 questions, for example, and I have 5 different workshops. And each one is to address a different challenge that they're facing in their business. So I'm not going to teach them why they should do it. I'm going to share how it works and get as clear as I can. And then in the end, it's going to be up to them to choose to what degree they implement it. And a lot of times, like if I've had a lot of companies reach out to me, and I won't work with them because I don't feel I can help them. And and I'll just be very clear, this is where you'll need to be in order for me to help. I can remember a school system, and they were really struggling, and I went to the administration. They asked me to come in, and I told them I need 2 teachers who will champion this kind of model we were going to implement. There weren't 2 teachers, And I just said, look, I'm not going to be able to help until you have at least 2 teachers that are going to be in the environment to give me feedback and to advocate for this. And if not, it's just a talk. And I'm not, sometimes I'm motivated to speak, but I'm not a motivational speaker. So it's like, if there isn't transformation on the other end, we're wasting our time. So, and I think that's one of the challenges is if it's like teaching people Tai Chi, if they're sitting there saying, this isn't going to help me, or I don't want to relax, it won't work, period. It just won't. So I've just learned to focus. I don't try to teach anyone anything. I just try to be as clear as I can with the model that I think could be helpful to them, and then be there as their guide as they make the decisions to implement with varying degrees of success. That's where the expertise comes in. It's like, what went wrong? Okay, let's troubleshoot that. And the last part to that was always helpful to me was this idea of keep asking bigger and better questions until the questions disappear and the answer reveals itself. And what I found is most of them, they know the answers. They just don't know what questions they should be asking. So I'm focused on helping them figure out how to ask bigger and better questions, because I don't want them to need me. So if I can get them thinking a little differently and they can produce a better result, great, go be awesome. Go run an awesome business and do the work that you choose to do that matters. That's what the commitment is to.
And thank you very much. Malcolm's got his hand up, but Malcolm, we're coming to the end now because other people are going to be dropping off, and I don't want to see the black screen and just me, you, and Ken here. So as we're coming to the end,
final thing you said there.
Quick question.
Ken, no, it's what a coach does. Brings the answer to the surface. We don't teach people; it's within them. We draw it out. Okay.
Exactly.
I love the conversation. Next week, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of concepts that are going to build on this, and you're going to love it. Okay? Because
listen. Let me thank Ken. Thank you, Ken. Thanks very much. Thank you very much
Very
for
welcome.
your time,
Very welcome.
your insights and your knowledge and everything. Thank you everyone for being here. And next week we're going to have Malcolm Evans talking to us, and the title is going to be Sales Cures All, or poor performance, not performance, but poor performance, if I said that right. So hopefully I'll see you guys next week, next Tuesday, same time, 5 to 6 p.m. CET, Central European Time. If you're free, come along. Again, thank you again, Ken, Debbie, Stanley, Steve, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
thanks, Ken. I'll come find you in LinkedIn. Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ken, again. Thank you.
Next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Bye-bye.